Hello, good morning. I'm here now, and it is about 6:55 a.m., but I will not be here when you are here because I will be back at home with my sick kid who was up coughing and feeling pretty lousy all night. It's one of those kind of scary coughs where it's not out of the realm of possibility that lungs could literally go out of body into, and out of mouth onto the floor. Um, and I have a bit of medical background and training. Um, I'm kind of like a DIY, like do-it-yourselfer doctor, but I think that like lung replacement, especially since I don't have like surgical tools or knowledge, uh, is a bit above my expertise level, and so we thought it best that to not even put me in that situation. So we're gonna keep him home today, and that way, if lungs do come leaping or flying out, then we can deal with that. So anyway, we're gonna do a couple things today. I'm gonna talk you through reading. We're gonna talk a little bit about what you're gonna do with the assignment that you were doing in class yesterday, and then you'll do your thing after that. So, if everyone could open up to page 123, if I were you, I would have notes out. Again, even if you're just kind of labeling the things you're writing down, description of Jacob or change in Jacob or things like that, that could be useful for you. So on page 123, um, this is still told from the perspective of Florence as she is on her way to see Blacksmith. She just ran into the Native Americans who gave her some water, and whoa, what just happened to my head? It got real big all of a sudden. Things are weird in 129 this morning. Anyway, on page 123, she's kind of reminiscing and remembering and reminiscing about time with the blacksmith and kind of the secret code he would use in terms of when she should come see him. And then on 123, every time I read this, I think that this is Lena's perspective. And Lena is giving advice to Florence in terms of why she shouldn't get involved with the blacksmith. If you remember that scene when Rebecca asked Lena if she had ever been involved with a guy, I think this is what she was referring to, that Lena was referring to. Saying she was 14, talks about, and I'm assuming that she was working for this guy, that she was probably servant or slave to this guy. A Spanish coin is lost through one piece in her apron pocket and is never found. He cannot forgive this. I'm already 14 and not a know better, she is saying. And the fact that I think it's she is saying leads me to think that this is Lena talking. And now she is saying, I do. She tells me how it is to walk town lanes, wiping blood from her nose with her fingers, because her eyes are closing, she stumbles and make people believe she's in liquor, like so many natives, and tell her so. So it appears that this dude beat her up. And so she's telling her what it's like to walk through town bleeding all over, and I think the reason she's stumbling is because she's been hit. And so the people are drawing the worst case conclusion as to what's going on and kind of drawing on stereotypes that she's drunk. And that's what causes the Presbyterians to put her up for sale, and that's how she ends up at Jacob's, which is why she's not interested in being involved with any dude, because it completely changed her life. Go to page 124. Got a couple things here that you may want to jot down. We've got, as far as I can tell, this is kind of the first indication that Jacob is changing his mind in terms of going from just being a farmer to investing in slave trade and things like that. And he doesn't really even talk about that specifically, but kind of midway down the page, I come into the part where cows are grazing among the trees. If cows are in the woods, a farm or village is near. Neither sir nor mistress will let a few heads loose like that. So Jacob and Rebecca don't let their cattle just kind of roam free. They fence the meadow because they want the manure and not a quarrel with their neighbors. Mistress says Sir is grazing will soon die in the meadow, so he has other business because farming will never be enough in these parts. So he says, so they fence off this land so they don't have to have disputes with neighbors, and also then they can collect the manure and use it for farming. But because of that, Jacob says that the meadow that they're using for their animals to graze is going to die off, and that therefore farming they're never going to have enough in these parts, which seems to indicate that maybe at some point he's interested in adding something else. We also have a good quote about nature. For those of you who were writing about coming up with a thesis about the eagle story about nature, this is another one you could bring in. Farms live and die by desire of insects or on the whim of the weather. So we've seen instances where characters, notably Jacob, tried to control nature and the badness that results from that. And this is another quote that people live and die based on how the insects are feeling or whatever the weather decides to happen up today. So it really shows that if you remember back to realism, that nature doesn't really care about us, and it needs to be respected. Otherwise, we end up in big trouble. Going on, go to page 130. So we get the scene where, even before that, where uh, Florence finds the houses and she goes into the house, and in the house is the widow Easley and her daughter Jane, and widow Ealing, sorry. And the people in the town think the widow Ealing's daughter Jane is a witch. And so what widow Ealing is doing, and I've given you some advice on witches back in the Crucible, like how to start a party and how to tell if someone's a witch. I don't advocate this advice because it's messed up, but she says that humans are the only thing that bleed. The demons or witches do not bleed, and so every day she lashes her daughter so that her legs are bleeding, and she just has to kind of lay there in bloody legs so that anytime anyone comes, they see that daughter's bleeding and therefore not a demon. The logic is flawed, and it's messed up way to treat your kid. But anyway, so Florence goes there. And then on page 130, this is something that we referred to back on the first page. If you remember in the first day when we went through that first chapter and looked for seeds or things which seem to stand out as important or weird, we get a couple of these. So right before the people show up, it says on page 130, I take the bowls and spoons from the table to the closet where a basin of water sits on a narrow bench. I rinse and wipe each piece carefully. The air is tight. Water rises to a boil in the kettle hanging in the fireplace. So the air being tight means there's not a lot of air moving in this place, which would allow the steam to form. Like if someone was blowing smoke rings or doing something like that, that if it was breezy, it would blow it all away. But if it's still in there, then they stay. Water rises to a boil in the kettle hanging in the fireplace. I turn and see its steam forming shapes as it curls against the stone. One shape looks like the head of a dog. Right? So if you remember back to the first page of the book, it said, you might think what I tell you a confession if you like, so we still haven't gotten to the part where she's confessing anything, really. But one full of curiosity is familiar only in dreams, and during those moments when a dog's profile plays in the steam of a kettle, stranger things happen all the time. You know, I know you know. One question is who is responsible. Another is can you read? If a peahen refused to brood, I read it quickly, and sure enough, that night I see Miname standing hand in hand with a little boy, my shoes jamming the pocket of her apron. Other signs need more understanding. I know I'm missing much. Now, this was a sign, right? And she didn't read it yet, but right the next sentence after that, we hear footsteps climbing up the path. Okay, now on page 131, we get the same idea, and she says, I'm not understanding anything except that I'm in danger as the dog head shows, and mistress is my only defense. Okay, so just to give you a little dateline of where we're at, we talked about Bacon's Rebellion in the beginning of the book. Bacon's Rebellion was in 1676. This book started 6 years after that, and that was when Jacob was going to pick up Florence. And so that would be another 6, 7 years after that. And so really, this is about 3 years before the Salem witch trials. So we're not quite in that area, but we're right in that time period. And so I'm not entirely sure whether that feeds into it seems like this is a scene right out of the Crucible here. But these people think she's a witch, and then they see Florence, who is of darker skin complexion, and then they think that she is related to the black man, which is kind of straight up racist. But description of the devil. Going on to page 135. So we see the letter. She's got the letter in her pocket. And then she ends up saving the daughter, right? She ends up saving Jane. And so after they go to kind of look at this letter and reflect and pray about what they're going to do about it, Jane cooks her some eggs and wraps them up so she's got some food to eat and follows her, takes her out to the woods. And on 135 it says, I thank you, and lift her hand to kiss it. She says, no, I thank you. They look at you and forget about me. This is what Jane's saying. She kisses my forehead, then watches as I step down into the stream's bed. I turn and look up at her. Are you a demon, I ask her? Her wayward eye is steady. She smiles. Yes, she says. Oh, yes, go now. I don't know what to make of that, other than it's awesome. So if you've got any ideas, I'd love to hear them tomorrow. Anyway, going on down to the bottom of 135, if you remember back to the eagle story, without the letter, I am belong. With the letter, I am belong, and I'm lawful. With the letter, I'm safe. Without it, I'm a weak calf abandoned by the herd, a turtle without a shell, a minion with no telltale signs but a darkness I'm born with. Outside, yes, but inside as well, and the inside dark is small, feathered, and toothy. Is that what my mother knows? Now, think about Mom. Think about the eagle story. Think about what happened. Okay? Now, she's basically relating herself to the baby eagles, right? Small, feathered, and toothy. That idea is going to come up again later. Okay? Why she chooses to live without me? Anyway, she's going down, and these are still, she's kind of reflecting and wondering about what Mom wanted to say to her. Why Mom gave her away. And, Mom had that, she was saying something that Florence could see she was saying something that was important, but because she couldn't hear what was going on, she's left to wonder about it forever after that. Going on to the next chapter, we finally get Sorrow's story. And It was easy to be confused. Sometimes she did not mind when they called her Sorrow, as long as Twin kept using her real name. Having two names was convenient since Twin couldn't be seen by anyone else. Now, this is the second character where we've seen kind of, this is maybe a little more delusional way, but basically make up their reality, right? So you've got Lena, and in terms of, religious beliefs in the book, this isn't a religious belief, but this is a way of understanding the world. Um, the two characters who do the best on a whole, while Sorrow's kind of, she's disturbed, but she seems fairly content, they make the world make sense, right? So Sorrow woke up in a really terrible circumstance that she had been raised by her father to just live on this boat, right? Because she was really good at mending sails. That was her one job, which is an important job, and involves climbing way up the mast and doing all that stuff. But because of that, she had never even been on land before. And so if you've ever gone out like in a boat in the ocean, like a cruise or something, and the waves are, and you get kind of, dizzy or nauseous or whatever, for her, that waviness was all she'd ever known. And so when she was on the land, which didn't move, that was as jarring to her as going out on the sea was for someone who's used to being on land. So she wakes up. She'd had surgery on page 138, opium surgery to have some boils removed. And while she was under the influence of opium, she was passed out, and apparently this ship crashed. She could hear kind of through this hazy fog. There's a couple instances in here where it talks about hearing through the clouds, but that things were happening, and that people were screaming, and people were running, and there was lots of loud explosions. But because she was knocked out, right? She couldn't really respond to any of these things. And when she woke up, everyone was gone. And on 138, before coming to the Sawyer's house, Sorrow had never lived on land. Now the memories of the ship, the only home she knew, seemed as stolen as its cargo. Bales of cloth, chests of opium, crates of ammunition, horses and barrels of molasses. Now, you can also, again, relate this to Lena, because both Sorrow and Lena are taken from everything they've known, and everything they know is gone, right? For Lena's tribe, it was smallpox and then burning the village and all that stuff. For Sorrow, it was the ship crashing and everyone she'd known, and the only place she'd ever known, going from, wavy water to still land. Nothing makes sense, right? But they both kind of took matters into their own hands, I guess, and made the world make sense to themselves. Remember back to modernism, we talked a little bit about the world didn't make sense, and people were very sad about that and wished it did. While this time period in the book is obviously not postmodernism, the way the book is written is, and it seems like both of those characters kind of took what you could describe as maybe a post-modern strategy in terms of understanding the world. They both made it up, and for them it works. Even the trace of Captain was dim. After searching for survivors and food, fingering spilt molasses into the deck straight into her mouth, nights listening to the cold wind and lapping sea, Twin joined her under the hammock, and they've been together ever since. So as soon as Twin shows up on page 141, we get some good information about Twin, if you're looking for evidence of what I was talking about. So she was sold to these people, or given to the house, maybe rather the woman who collected her. She was given chores, but she couldn't do them well. The pleasure of upbraiding an incompetent servant outweighed any satisfaction of a chore well done, and the housewife raged happily at every unswept corner, poorly made fire, imperfectly scrubbed pot, carelessly weeded garden row, and badly plucked bird. So it was almost like the owner of Sorrow liked to hurt Sorrow and yell at her more than having the job done well. And so they put up with the poor job she was doing, because then it allowed them to be quite mean to her. But description of Twin. This is when she's pregnant with baby number one. Okay, and we'd ask, do we know who father of baby number one is? And it says, Twin and she talked about it, about whether it was the result of the goings-on that took place behind the stack of clapboard, both brothers attending instead of what the housewife said. So I'm not sure what the housewife said, but she's wondering, apparently something was going on with those two brothers, and she and Twin are discussing whether that is the cause of what's going on with her, because she doesn't know at this point. Then she is taken by Jacob, and she is preggo by that point. And on 140, go to 145. So Lena tells her she's pregnant. Therefore, it was Lena who told Sorrow she was pregnant on 145. Lena had removed a basket of millet from Sorrow's hands, looked her dead in the eye, and said, "Do you know you're with child? Child?" Sorrow's jaw dropped. Then she flushed with pleasure at the thought of a real person, a person of her own growing inside of her. The person of her own is what she's looking for with Twin, because she is nobody, and that's why the name Sorrow fits. Now, this is where it gets messed up. Mistress had delivered a fat boy who cheered everybody up for 6 months anyway. They put him with his brother at the bottom of the rise behind the house and said prayers. So baby was born, fat baby boy, seemed healthy, lived for 6 months, and then they passed away, and they buried him with his brother at the bottom of the hill, and then said prayers. Now, although Sorrow thought she saw her newborn yawn, Lena had said baby was born, and it was stillborn, so that it was not living when it was born. But sorrow where she saw the baby yawn. Lena wrapped in a piece of sacking and set her to sail in the widest part of the stream and far below the beaver's dam. It had no name. Sorrow wept, but Twin told her not to. I am always with you. That was some consolation, but it took years for Sorrow's steady thoughts of her baby breathing underwater under Lena's palm to recede. Lena held the baby underwater. She said it wasn't breathing to begin with, and so Lena does not want this baby here because she doesn't think the baby that Sorrow's going to have is going to be one that's useful on the farm, and plus she doesn't think Sorrow can take care of her baby, which would then fall to her to take care of this extra mouth, an extra baby. Yeah, it's messed up. Going on 146. I'm not going to read this part to you, but we get kind of a random dirty joke in the middle of the page that seems out of tone for this book, but anyway, I think Toni Morrison was feeling naughty. Moving forward, and then on 149, we get another description of Twin. So a couple pages ago, we talked about showing how Twin helped Sorrow make sense of the world and make everything fit for her. So that she's kind of flashing back, horses pounding hooves, freed from below, leaping over sacks of grain and kicking barrels until the staves broke and a thick, sweet molasses poured out. Still, she could not move or tear through the clouds. She hears all this stuff going on, and she's kind of aware of it, but because she's so messed up from the opium, she can't do anything. Pushing, she fell to the floor where the clouds covered and smothered her whole self, convincing her the screams belonged to gulls. When she came to, eyes the shape and color of her own greeted her. The puffy clouds, mere threads now, drifted away. I'm here, said the girl, with a face matching her own exactly. I'm always here. She's there for herself. With Twin, she was less afraid, and the two began peeking through the silent, listing ship. Slowly, peeking here, listening there, finding nothing except a bonnet and seagulls pecking at the remains of a colt. She needs Twin, right? Because Twin is the only person that she has. And then on page 150, this is why Freund is going to find the blacksmith. Blacksmith just happened to be there when Sorrow fell. Sorrow got smallpox and kind of collapsed, and Blacksmith happened to be there. I don't know that this is the proper cure for smallpox. I think it's been eradicated, so hopefully we don't need to worry about it. Bit by bit, under the smithy's care and Floren's nursing, the boils shriveled, the welts disappeared, and their strength returned. Now their judgment was clear. The blacksmith was a savior. Okay. Now, she had said, sorry, I thought we had, oh, here we go. So they took a knife and they bathed her in vinegar, and then they cut these boils open with the sword, and then made her drink her own blood, and then basically just kind of sweat out the fever. They wouldn't let her eat or drink, and she just had to stay there and be feverish. And then finally the fever broke, and she started to heal and want to eat and drink again. Okay, so for tomorrow, you're going to read up to page 175. We're going to finish the book for Thursday, and then we're going to start talking paper. So I'm going to have you do one more thing before you start reading. So if you need a couple more minutes to get started on this, you can, or to finish this up. So yesterday in class, in your groups, each of you took one of those sections, and you were to write down a thesis and then a couple things you talk about with that. I'm just going to have you don't need to write your number on the top. I'm sorry, write your number. You don't need to write your name on the top, but write the number of your group. And then what you're going to do, once everyone group has that written down, so if you need a couple more minutes, you can have it, but then pass it up to the sub. Sub's going to pass each of those sheets out to a different group. And the different group, I want you to respond to what the previous group said in terms of, is this an argument that needs to be made? Is this a thesis that you could argue, and do these points seem to make any sense? So some things to think about when you're doing that, and then I want you to respond either on a separate sheet of paper, or if there's room on that sheet of paper, either what could be improved in this or why it's not as effective as it could be. And then you're going to pass those back to the sub. Sub's going to pass those back to their original group, and then I want you to fix it. Okay, so if the group that looked at yours, actually, I take that back. Let me start this out. I'm kind of thinking this through as I go. After the first group, right, has made comments on it, I want you to then exchange papers one more time and do it a second time, so that each group will have the thesis they wrote, the couple things they bring up in their argument, and then two responses to it from two separate groups. Each group, I want you to write your number on the side, okay, and then fix it, and then you'll submit those back to the sub. Okay, so I think I made this about as confusing as I can, so let me recap this one more time for you. Yesterday in class, you wrote a thesis, and then a couple of things you talk about in your argument. If you're not done with that, step one, take a couple minutes to finish that up. Step two, write your group number on the top, okay, and then pass it up to the teacher. The teacher's going to give each group a different slip of paper, respond to the thesis and argument made by the previous group. If there are things that need to be changed, talk about what you could do to change them or what's wrong with it. You're going to pass that back to the sub. Sub's going to pass that to a different group. So each group is going to read 2 other groups. Sorry, my laptop went off. I don't know if you could see me or whether I was starting to freak out. I've been recording 20 minutes and all of a sudden my laptop shut off. And I nearly threw my laptop across the room. So if you just saw me with a panic look on my face, the screen went black, so I'm not sure. It's still recording, so I'm not sure if it recorded that. If it did, sorry. So, I don't know whether you saw that or not. Anyway, after the second group has responded, pass it back to the sub. Sub will give each group their original paper back, and then you clean it up. Okay? So then we'll talk about those in class tomorrow. For tomorrow, you're going to read up to page 145 for tomorrow. So 120 to 145, and then we'll finish the book for Thursday. So if you have any questions, I will be back tomorrow. Bye.